be pulling back immigration enforcement agents out of Minnesota?
We want to keep our country safe. We'll do whatever we can to keep our country safe.
So not pulling back?
No, not at all.
On paper, a crackdown is a directive. In real life, it becomes a chain of street-level decisions that courts, mayors, and witnesses can document in minutes. In Portland, according to public reporting, federal agents used tear gas during a protest outside an ICE facility, and the mayor demanded ICE leave the city. In Minnesota, according to public reporting, a federal judge ordered the release of a 5-year-old boy and his father from immigration custody. In Chicago, according to public reporting, a federal judge ordered immigration agents to wear body cameras, and another hearing pressed officials on force and recording. Trump's posture is simple: push harder. The country's institutions are responding with constraints, not applause. Trump's immigration posture is built around a familiar wager. If enforcement looks relentless, resistance will fold. That wager fails the moment enforcement leaves the press release and enters a city street. According to public reporting, thousands of demonstrators reached the South Waterfront ICE facility in Portland during a weekend protest. Witnesses described agents deploying tear gas, pepper balls, and rubber bullets as the crowd arrived. Public reporting also said the mayor of Portland demanded ICE leave the city after the incident, and it was described as involving demonstrators that included young children. This is the first crack in Trump's logic. A directive can order an agency to move. It cannot order the public to stay quiet, or a mayor to stay compliant, or bystanders to stop filming. When an enforcement surge meets a mass crowd, the operational focus shifts from targets and paperwork to perimeter, control, and optics. That shift is not just political, it is evidentiary. Every use of force creates a record problem that Trump cannot solve with volume. Agencies have to justify decisions, identify personnel, and preserve documentation that survives scrutiny. Local leaders can demand explanations, request federal coordination, and amplify claims of peaceful protest being met with federal force. Even if federal officials dispute characterization, the dispute itself becomes a second story that drains attention from Trump's intended message. The blind spot is structural. Trump treats this as a single lever pulled from Washington. But enforcement is implemented by humans, under stress, in public, inside jurisdictions that can refuse cooperation, and inside courts that can demand accountability. The surge creates not only arrests, but also grievances, affidavits, and case files. Institutional resistance does not have to look like a blockade. Sometimes it looks like city governments questioning legitimacy, civil rights attorneys preparing filings, and judges looking for hard proof rather than slogans. In that environment, Trump is not directing events. He is reacting to aftershocks. Trump may frame this as strength. On the ground, it reads as friction, and friction is where enforcement operations start bleeding time, credibility, and legal margin. The harder the push becomes, the more each street incident creates the next constraint waiting to be imposed. Trump's next move in a crackdown is usually escalation by repetition. More agents, more stops, more visible presence. He sells it as deterrence. Institutions treat it as exposure. According to public reporting, the American Civil Liberties Union filed a class action lawsuit against the federal government on behalf of 3 Minnesotans who say their constitutional rights were violated by ICE, Customs and Border Protection, and other federal agents. The reporting described the lawsuit as challenging racial profiling and arrests without warrants and without probable cause. And it framed the dispute as a constitutional rights case rather than a policy debate. Public reporting also described one of the men in the lawsuit as 20-year-old U.S. citizen Mubashir Khalif Hussein. The reporting said he was walking to lunch in the Cedar Riverside neighborhood in Minneapolis on the 10th of December 2025 when multiple masked agents stopped him. According to that same reporting, Hussein said he tried telling them he was a citizen, but they refused to look at his identification, drove him to a building, and he said he was shackled before being let go. A lawsuit like that is not a political argument. It is a mechanism. It forces sworn declarations, fixed timelines, and a judge who will care more about what happened in a specific encounter than what Trump wanted the public to feel. Trump's blind spot is the belief that speed itself is victory. But speed creates mistakes, and mistakes become exhibits. That pressure intensified when Minnesota's enforcement surge reached court. According to public reporting, A federal judge denied a preliminary injunction that sought to halt an immigration enforcement operation described as Operation Metro Surge. Public reporting said the lawsuit was filed by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul. The same reporting connected the operation to shootings by federal officials that month, including 2 fatal shootings. Trump's posture relies on a simple story. The federal government acts, states comply. Minnesota's response shows the opposite. Local officials use the courts as a braking system. Even a denial of emergency relief still locks the dispute into federal litigation, where the government must justify actions, where factual records matter, and where every disputed stop becomes part of a pattern argument. For Trump, this creates a narrowing corridor. Pulling back concedes that the surge produced unacceptable harm and political fallout. Pushing forward multiplies encounters that can be challenged as unlawful, including encounters involving citizens and lawful residents. Each additional stop can generate another affidavit. Each use of force can generate another hearing. Each disputed arrest can become a suppression fight that weakens prosecutions. According to public reporting, after the ruling, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary characterized it as a win for public safety and law and order, while Ellison said the lawsuit remained ongoing despite the decision. That split response matters. It shows Trump's team trying to declare victory in sound bites, while the legal process continues to grind forward, immune to messaging. An operation can continue, but it cannot escape documentation, and it cannot escape the long horizon of constitutional litigation. The destabilizing consequence is not one courtroom loss. It is the stacking of risks that turn a political posture into a growing archive of contested conduct. As the archive grows, Trump's remaining options shrink into a choice between retreat and deeper exposure. The breaking point in a crackdown is not when agents show up. It is when courts begin treating the crackdown as a credibility problem. Trump's posture assumes enforcement is self-justifying. If an operation is labeled public safety, he expects the label to carry the day. The institutional reality is colder. Judges do not litigate slogans. They litigate evidence, procedures, and the rights of people swept into the machinery. Chicago shows the problem in its most disciplined form. According to public reporting, a federal judge ordered immigration agents to wear body cameras in Chicago amid claims that agents had targeted U.S. citizens and used force. That is not a symbolic request. It is a judicial instruction designed to reduce disputes by creating a record. A body camera turns an allegation into a frame-by-frame sequence. It also turns agency narratives into something that can be tested under oath. The pressure point is that the court felt compelled to intervene. When a judge orders recording, it is often because the judge suspects that later arguments will collapse into competing stories. Trump's playbook depends on dominance through velocity. Courts depend on verifiable facts. Those logics are incompatible. Another Chicago hearing underlined how quickly a surge becomes an evidence crisis. According to public reporting, a judge questioned top officials over ICE agents' use of force and the extent to which body cameras were being used during an enforcement effort described as Operation Midway Blitz. That type of questioning is not theatrical. It is a warning that the court is tracking compliance in real time. If cameras are required, then missing footage is not a neutral absence. It becomes an argument. This is where Trump's miscalculation hardens into constraint. A crackdown multiplies encounters. Encounters multiply disputes. Disputes multiply motions. Motions multiply court orders. A surge that was supposed to broadcast dominance begins to generate the opposite. Requirements that slow operations and raise the cost of every mistake. And mistakes are procedural, not sentimental. If an arrest is challenged, attorneys ask for video. If the video is missing, they ask why. If a use of force report is inconsistent, they compare it to other reports. If a pattern emerges, they file broader claims. The consequence is mechanical: more hearings, more judicial supervision, more risk that evidence is suppressed or that civil claims expand. Trump cannot command judges to ignore those mechanics. Now connect that to Minnesota, where the crackdown did not stay confined to immigration status. According to public reporting, a lawsuit filed on behalf of 3 Minnesotans alleged that federal agents were racially profiling and arresting people without warrants and without probable cause. Public reporting described one plaintiff as U.S., Citizen Mubashir Khalif Hussein, who said masked agents stopped him in Minneapolis, refused to look at his identification, drove him to a building, and he said he was shackled before being let go. In Trump's message discipline, that kind of account is dismissed as noise. In a courtroom, it is the seed of pattern evidence. It allows lawyers to argue that the problem is not a single bad encounter, but a method. Once the dispute becomes about method, the administration loses the ability to isolate incidents as exceptions. Even when judges decline to halt an operation immediately, they still shape the battlefield. According to public reporting, a federal judge denied a preliminary injunction that sought to halt an immigration enforcement operation described as Operation Metro Surge in a case brought by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul. Public reporting connected the operation to shootings by federal officials that month, including 2 fatal shootings. Trump tries to turn every ruling into momentum. According to public reporting, after the injunction was denied, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary framed it as a win for public safety and law and order. The same reporting said Ellison described the lawsuit as continuing. That split response reveals the trap. Trump can declare victories. He cannot stop courts from gathering records. Portland shows how fast street actions feed this judicial machine. According to public reporting, federal agents used tear gas during a protest outside an ICE facility in Portland, and witnesses described pepper balls and rubber bullets. Public reporting said the mayor demanded ICE leave the city afterward. That confrontation is not only a political flashpoint, it is also an evidentiary event. Who ordered what? What tools were used? What warnings were given? What documentation exists? And what video shows? Then the limits became visible in human scale. According to public reporting, U.S. District Judge Fred Byery ordered the release of 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos and his father, Adrian Alexander Conejo Ramos, from immigration custody as soon as practicable. According to that reporting, they were released from ICE custody a day after the order. This is not about emotion. It is about the administration losing control of the narrative of precision. Trump wants a crackdown that looks clean, controlled, and targeted. A federal judge ordering the release of a 5-year-old and his father is a public signal that the process can fail under surge conditions. It tells other courts that emergency intervention may be necessary. It tells communities that the system is capable of sweeping up families faster than it can justify. Trump's defenders can argue that enforcement is necessary. That does not answer the institutional question that keeps returning. Who was detained, under what authority, and what documentation exists to support it? A judge's order to release is the sharpest form of resistance because it converts broad policy into a specific legal failure. This is why evidence disputes are the true breaking point. On streets, the administration can attempt to project control. In court, control is measured by records, body cameras, compliance reports, detention logs, and sworn declarations are not optional props. They are the currency of legitimacy. At this stage, Trump becomes reactive by design. He has to respond to court timelines, to judges who demand documentation, to mayors who challenge federal presence, and to a public that has now seen force in Portland and judicial intervention in Minnesota. The options narrow into unpleasant choices: intensify and generate more evidence problems, or slow down and admit that the surge cannot be sustained at the pace he promised. When a crackdown turns into an evidence battle, Trump is no longer leading events. He is being managed by institutions that he cannot fire. By the time a crackdown produces street confrontations and court supervision, it has already shifted from enforcement to containment. Trump's decision to push harder does not expand control. It expands liabilities. The pattern is visible across multiple jurisdictions. In Portland, according to public reporting, federal agents used tear gas during a protest outside an ICE facility. Witnesses described pepper balls and rubber bullets, and public reporting said the mayor demanded ICE leave the city afterward. In Minnesota, according to public reporting, a class action lawsuit filed on behalf of 3 residents alleged racial profiling and arrests without warrants and without probable cause. The reporting described one plaintiff as U.S. Citizen Mubashir Khalif Hussein, who said masked agents stopped him in Minneapolis, refused to look at his identification, drove him to a building, and he said he was shackled before being let go. According to public reporting, Minnesota's Attorney General and the mayors of Minneapolis and St. Paul sought an injunction to halt an enforcement effort described as Operation Metro Surge, and a federal judge denied that preliminary injunction. The same reporting connected the operation to shootings by federal officials that month, including 2 fatal shootings. Trump's team framed the denial as a win. The state said the case continued. That is the real dynamic: messaging versus process. Chicago adds the hard edge of institutional constraint. According to public reporting, a federal judge ordered immigration agents to wear body cameras in Chicago amid claims involving U.S. citizens and use of force. Another hearing questioned top officials over force and body camera use during an enforcement effort described as Operation Midway Blitz. This is what happens when a surge stops being a policy dispute and becomes a record dispute. Courts start demanding proof, not reassurance. This is also where Trump's political miscalculation deepens. He treats institutional pushback as partisan noise. But a mayor's demand that ICE leave a city, a state attorney general bringing suit, and a judge ordering body cameras are different categories of resistance. They are actions that create durable constraints. They shape how local agencies cooperate, how juries perceive credibility, and how federal agencies allocate resources when every move is now legally contestable. And the proof requirement slows everything. Agents become witnesses. Supervisors become deponents. Operations become discovery. Every contested stop becomes a decision tree that attorneys can reconstruct. Every missing video becomes a question of compliance. Every inconsistency becomes an opening for suppression motions and civil claims. Those are procedural consequences that necessarily follow once courts are engaged. Then, there is the human scale constraint that Trump cannot manage with slogans. According to public reporting, a federal judge ordered the release of 5-year-old Liam Conejo Ramos and his father from immigration custody, and they were released from ICE custody a day after the order. That kind of judicial intervention makes future judges more alert, not less. It also makes every subsequent detention more politically combustible. Trump's blind spot is that his leverage declines as scrutiny increases. If he intensifies, he expands the record that his opponents can litigate. If he slows down, he concedes that institutions force the slowdown. Either way, he is not in control of the timetable. Courts are. As these constraints harden, the crackdown becomes less a show of power and more a rolling test of whether Trump can endure the resistance he triggered. Trump's ICE push was designed to look like a single switch flipped from the top. Public reporting shows a system that fractures the moment it touches real streets. In Portland, the surge met thousands of demonstrators and ended with federal agents using tear gas and other crowd control munitions, followed by the mayor demanding ICE leave the city. In Minnesota, a lawsuit alleged warrantless arrests and racial profiling, including a U.S. citizen who said masked agents ignored his identification. A federal judge declined to halt Operation Metro Surge, and the dispute moved deeper into federal court. In Chicago, a federal judge ordered body cameras and pressed officials on force and compliance. Trump's miscalculation is simple. He treats intensity as control. Institutions respond by demanding proof, imposing supervision, and stretching timelines, leaving him with fewer options and more exposure. For more reporting-based analysis like this, subscribe and stay with the next briefing.